Hi, it's been a long time. I know. It's okay. I'm good. I hope you're good. I know you're good. So we roll, we move. I'm gonna talk about Beef, the new Netflix show. I don't know if you've watched it. If you haven't, it's okay because it's quite new. I mean, it premiered in April, and as of today, we're still in April. To bear in mind that this show is like an onion. You know how Shrek said that, ogres are like onions because they have layers? This show is a little ogre of a show. It has so many layers, and you can keep it as happy and fun and superficial as you want because it is a comedy, but at the same time, it is a tragedy, and at the same time, it has aspects of analytical TV shows. You know what I mean? I think you get me, even though I didn't explain that too good, to be honest, but you get it. It's funny while it's being sad, while it's being tragic. It can also get gory. So if you're up for a fun ride and kind of like a roller coaster of emotions, this is the show for you. It's analytical of contemporary American society, about immigration, about PC culture, basically about the obsession that in reality Western world has with therapy and wellness culture and being okay and being super politically correct and friendly and fake. Like, it's about masking emotions in society. It's about pretending. It's about what do you actually genuinely feel about a topic at hand, about a person, about where you are in life. Like, can you be honest with yourself? Can you express emotions rawly, or are you forced to pretend? I'm just gonna tell you what happens in Beef, all right, episode by episode, and listen to me. If any of what I just said previously sounded interesting to you, like something that you might like, watch it, and then if you want, just come and listen to this, because I'm just gonna spoil everything for you, and I don't want to be like, that friend that just spoils shit for you. So episode 1, we start by seeing Danny. He's in a shop called Foster's, which is like a homeware shop, and he's trying to return. He's in a queue trying to return some barbecues that he bought, and the scene opens with a lot of tension, with a lot of like atmospherically, you know that there's something wrong, and evidently it happens afterwards because Danny cannot return his like barbecue thingies. He cannot return it, and he's faced with a little bit of like a judgment of situation, and he's being judged, like, why are you returning this, why are you doing that, like, you've been here before, sir, it's the third time that you come, where's your ticket, like, and then very passive aggressive clerk is like on the intercom, like, if you're gonna return something, please have your ticket ready. And he's there, he's like, yo, like, why are you being so rude, you know what I mean? But that's how the show starts. So you're like, dude, like, what's going on? Like, the atmosphere is a bit tense in here. And basically what we end up knowing is that he bought this barbecue things to try to kill himself. And when he went back to return it, it was like as almost if life was like, yo, like, no, you still have to kill yourself, man. Like, super, super sad. And he's leaving, he's going out of Foster's, he's in his car, he's being like, well, fuck this, it went south, but okay, we move. And then when he's about to go out in his car, just a random SUV starts like banging on the how's it called, like beeping, like beep, and being very, very rude, giving him the middle finger, and just like, he's like, at that point he's like, I've had it, like, no. And they start, and both of these strangers get into a road rage situation. Yeah, they get into a road rage situation where they end up following each other on the streets and just being very messy and very petty, and that's how the show starts. And that's the premise of the show. The premise of the show is this two strangers meeting randomly over a road rage incident. So what happens after the road rage incident is that we see who's actually driving the SUV. We've presumed it was a man, but it was a woman. It was the female lead Amy, played by Ali Wong, that I mentioned before. And she seems, honestly, very, very, very frustrated when she arrives home to her husband, who is this dude, a bit of a douchebag, that has this whole aura of, I've never worked a Monday in my life, I'm old money, and like, you just need to do your gratitude journals and don't let anything bother you, and like doesn't allow her to express herself emotionally, be emotionally raw, and just tell her husband, dude, this happened, like fuck this. He's like, he doesn't want to hear anything of that because he's just too good for that. He's just like, just go write in your gratitude journal and don't let anything bother you, as if like we control human emotions like that, you know what I mean? But anyway, she arrives to her husband, and that's what she arrives to, which it would piss me off if that was my husband. I would be like, you don't have time to listen to me complain, then you don't have time to fuck me. So Amy, this woman, she's a very successful CEO. Like, she's not a gold digger that married this guy because he's old money or whatever. No, she has her own money. She's new money. She's the CEO of Hoyo House or Koyu House, which is like a plant thing. And she's very successful on her own accord. She's the one that bought the house. She's the one that is supporting the family. And the husband is kind of like a stay-at-home dad situation. And he emotionally is very caught into like this new wave of PC wellness culture. You get what I'm saying? Anyway, so Amy, she's struggling at the moment, and she is very disconnected from everything that surrounds her. Her family, her work, herself, her inner self. She genuinely seems extremely disconnected. And ultimately, what Amy genuinely wants is to be a stay-at-home mom, to not have to work, to have a man that takes care of her, and you know, she wants to be understood. She doesn't want to feel this disconnect, and she doesn't feel seen. She doesn't feel present with the people that surround her in whatever dynamic she's into. She always feels that she's masking who she truly is, and she's kind of tired of pretending. And if we go back to Danny, the contractor, that one that she got into the road rage incident with, the one that they still don't know each other, they're kind of like in the same place when it comes to emotions and how they feel. They're both very disconnected from their society. Their background is very similar. Their family dynamics and the relationship that they have with their parents is very similar. They have a lot of repressed anger. They feel that they cannot express themselves rawly, and they mask their emotions. They have the same kind of like inner dilemmas, and they question morality in their society based upon all that they've actually lived through. And they both have a little bit of, or a lot of, suicide ideation, and that they both have that need to connect, that need to be accepted. They're both extremely stressed out. They're both experiencing solitude and loneliness, and that is what connect both of these characters. Because even though Danny, he's struggling class, he's low class, and he is really financially going through it, and Amy isn't in that position, at the end of the day, both of them as humans are in the same place. So that brings into question this thing about contemporary American society, where everybody seems to be placed into a class and a structure, and either you're part of the 1%, the high class, elitism, academia, your middle class, your low class, you know, and everybody seems to have a place, and everybody's meant to connect with people from their same class. That's not necessarily the case, because people, as I said with the onion metaphor, people are very layered, and not everything is as easy as just because of your financial situation, you immediately are going to relate with people that are in the same predicament because you come from a different place. Well, both Danny and Amy come from the same place and are feeling inside the same. This leads to the end of the episode, which is the moment that you're like, okay, I get what's going on here. Danny actually gets like remembers her plate number and looks it up and pays to see where this person lives. And he goes and pays Amy a visit, thinking that it's probably Amy's husband, the one that's driving when they got into that fit of rage in the road. And then they have kind of like a good interaction, because he's thinking that, oh, it must have been the husband. But the moment that he knows that it was her, he goes and he pees all over the bathroom and just bounces. And Amy sees this and chases after him down the road, remembers his plate, his car plate, and she has an actual smirk and smile on her face. And so does Danny. This is the first time in the whole episode where we see a genuine emotion coming from either both of them, and it's based on that interaction that they had together. So that opens a little questions, because it's like, oh, you didn't have this connection with your brother or with your friends, or Amy, you didn't have it with your husband or with your daughter or with anybody, like anything of your surroundings, but you do have with this man that is now your nemesis. This is an enemies to lover type of situation. It's not. Not necessarily, because the point of the show, it has nothing to do with the search for love. It's about the quest for connection and being seen in a society that likes to mask everything. All right. Episode 2. This is called The Rapture of Being Alive, and this episode, alongside the first episode, builds tension, which will climax in the 4th episode, which is important to bear in mind. The 2nd episode, Amy searched for Danny on Instagram for his company and finds it, and she starts being extremely petty, and she starts leaving bad reviews on Yelp. All right. And that hinders Danny's business, because he wasn't already doing good. So if you see it from like an outsider position, you're like, yo, Amy, like you have a lot of money, you're financially well off, you have a family. Danny here is going through it, like, don't do that, don't be a bitch. But that's the pathos of this whole thing, is pettiness, all right? She also creates a fake Instagram profile using Mia. Mia? Okay. Mia is her employee. She's young and she's meant to be this hot girl. So she goes to her Instagram to screenshot some of her pictures to create a fake profile to start interacting with Danny's business profile, right? And while she's doing it, she's like on her phone and she's like, okay, I'm gonna screenshot this, screenshot that, blah, 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 blah. And she sees that her husband, George, the one that I mentioned before, has liked all of her pictures. And she's like, I don't like that. Like, explain. But she is like, okay, I'm gonna let it slip and slide, because she's too preoccupied with the situation that she's in with Danny. So she's like, whatever, blah, 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 whatever. In the meantime, while this is happening, because of those Yelp reviews, do you remember? Well, because of that, Danny needs to change the name of his company and like create another business and like close the other one, because like he wasn't getting any clients and it wasn't going nowhere. So here comes more into play Isaac. Picture of Isaac? Isaac is trash, but he's so funny and he's just a bad influence all around. Like, he is responsible for Danny's parents to be back in Korea, because that's where he's from, because he was dealing drugs illegally in the motel that they run, which is where they live now. And he was sent off to prison and now he's out and whatever. And Isaac, he just like lives life as if there's no tomorrow. He doesn't think anything true. He's looking for a quick buck, quick money, and just like, and he just wants to enjoy life. He doesn't have time for that. In the same kind of like paradigm is Paul, his brother. He's also in the vibe of like the youth culture in America, which is like just chilling, just minding his business. He just wants to enjoy life. He doesn't want to worry about anything. And he's at that point where he doesn't realize the importance that money has in society and in how everything works around you. So he's quite immature, and in the same way that George with Amy, they both lack touch with their actual realities. Like, George cannot genuinely connect to the reality of their family situation that Amy has because of his background and being like new money and blah blah blah. And Paul, because he's younger and because he has more of a connection to American society and American youth, cannot connect to the struggles of the situation of that his family's in, because he's just like, he's inside American culture in a way. No shade to American culture. It's just that I analyze that side of like minding my own business, leave me alone and fuck off. You know what I mean? All right. So because of that, Isaac tells Danny, going back to what I was saying, Isaac tells Danny, yo, like just put your company under my name and create a new one. Danny doesn't want that because he doesn't want to admit it, but he doesn't trust Isaac at all. So he decides to manipulate Paul, his brother, into doing it under his name, and he succeeds. And this is good. But do you remember that Instagram thingy that Amy was doing? It turns out that she now is not getting in touch with Danny. She's getting in touch with Paul, right? And Paul is a flirty little thing and starts flirting with Kayla, which is Mia, which is Amy. Did you get that? I know you did. Okay, good. So yeah, so they're DMing and Amy is kind of like going along with it because like Paul sends her a cute little like, ooh, look at my body, I'm working out and I'm hot type of thing, and she's just like going along with it, feeling some type of way about being desired, even though the pictures is not her, but she's catfishing him, bless him. But that's what she's doing. And while this is happening, Danny and Paul are like, we need to expand our new business called the Cho Brothers. Let's go to Orange County. Why? Because a girl called Veronica lives there. Veronica is Danny's ex. Here's the thing. The way that Veronica sees Danny, you do not see Danny. Danny does not see himself like that. But it's good because it shows that Veronica sees Danny in the way that maybe he used to be and sees the good things about him, which is good. It's going to play into things coming forward. So Veronica is married to this new guy called Edwin, who seems to be like perfect. Handsome, he has a job, they have a house, Veronica's pregnant, and they go there. Danny obviously is uncomfortable because imagine seeing your ex pregnant with like a banging guy and in a gray house. He's like, oh fuck, I couldn't give her this, and that's why I'm failing in a way, because he's going through it. No shade, no anything, but he is. And yeah, they just ask for work, and asking for work, they're like, yo, like, come to our church. So that little nugget is put there, and that will play into things later on, okay? So that same day, that night, Amy and George, they have to attend a meeting with the CEO of Foster's. You remember the shop that Danny was in, trying to return his suicide attempt method, his barbecues. Well, that shop is owned by a woman, a CEO called Jordana, who represents elitism, the 1%, the ultimate disconnect from humanity and humans and society, all right? And she is very important because Amy is trying to sell her business to her for $10 million, and if that deal goes through, then she can finally be what she wants to be, which is a stay-at-home wife, mother, and just feel that maybe she can connect more with her husband that way and have this type of life and not have to work, because she hates it. So they go to a gallery. The gallery is about the pieces, the chairs that George's father did before he passed, because he was an artist and that's where they got their money from. And Jordana wants a chair. Now you might think, oh, this is so irrelevant. Okay, a chair. Well, that chair is not just any chair. That chair is actually the tamago. Yeah, Jordana wants it, and she's just like, come on, there's a price. There's always a price for everything. That's how she rolls. She thinks that because she has money, like she can generally buy everything and do anything and be everything. And George is like, nah. And Amy's like, how can you be saying no to the woman that I need to say yes to the deal in order for our family to move forward? Like, how disconnected are you? So you can see that they keep disconnecting, and Jordana is like, okay, I have to bounce, I have to go. Like, she's not interested in being there anymore or talking to Amy about the deal after Danny says no. And Danny seems to be completely beyond himself to comprehend that there's another reality where you actually need to work and you actually need to make money in order to have a family. So Amy's just like, dude, like, what's wrong with you, man? And bear in mind, she's been 2 years trying to get this deal done and sealed and give me my money and let me bounce. And George goes ahead and does that? No, that's not good. That's not good. So Amy kind of like, still masking her emotions, she confronts George and she's like, why do you do this? Do you not understand how important it is for me? But still trying to be very socially acceptable and socially controlled, in control of her emotions. And George is like disconnected, tells her about a gun incident, which is kind of relevant to the entire story, but not really. But I'll explain. Just give me a second. Let me finish this. So they start talking or whatever, and Amy basically tells him that sex with you is uber vanilla and it doesn't get me off, and that's why she uses the gun, because she knows that that's wrong to masturbate. Like, honestly, Amy needs Jesus. But yeah, so George is like, what is going on? And Amy's just like, this dude doesn't get me, okay? So this episode is important. Why? Because it shows genuinely how disconnected they are from their inner circles, like from the people that you should feel safe and connected and seen, and that they know who you are in this. It's like they're completely alone in their inner circles and in their realities, and this episode really shows that. That's why it's important. Episode 3, I'm inhabited in a cry. All right, so this episode starts with a scene that I think is very important, and it's Amy and George in couples therapy. So Amy is being so numb to what's going on in that therapy session. She's genuinely just saying what she knows people want to hear in order to be left alone and just to be okay, because like this whole therapy wellness type of deal, she doesn't connect to it, and she's just like saying what she has to say just to like be like, yeah, all right, we're in couples therapy, I agree to this because I care, and she cares a lot about her marriage, but she's numb, she's disconnected, you know, like, and all the meanwhile she's thinking about Danny and about their beef and about she being on Instagram talking to Paul and doing all this like petty things. That's what's kind of like giving her life at the moment, and she's just thinking about that in order to go by. It kind of like becomes a bit of their purpose in the mixture of their goals for both of them, and that gives her a little bit of feeling, like she feels something, whether it's negative or positive, at least it's something with this beef that she has going on with Danny, and that for her is more important than what she thinks, because she's getting number and number by the day by her surroundings. All right, then between all the pettiness, Danny was trying to do something to Amy, right? And he realizes like, dude, what am I doing with my life? I need Jesus. So he goes to church, and we have an extremely well acted scene that is kind of like a breaking down. Like Danny completely breaks down everything, the situation with Isaac, with Paul, with his parents back in Korea, with work, with everything. He's just like finally allows himself to break down and cry and connect to something that's above all of those things, in this case being Jesus. And it's a very beautiful scene. It's very, very beautiful. But don't think that because of that he stops his way. He's still out here sitting, okay? And what's important about this and about this scene and about the scenes that are interpolated into the therapy scene about Amy is that in both of them we see genuine emotion in comparison to the other scenes with other people, right? So that is an extent where actually real emotion is showcased, and it humanizes both of them, because neither of them are really likable characters, and it's hard to have, or you don't genuinely love or are rooting for a character, you know what I mean? But this humanizes them. This episode genuinely does. and that's very good, and it makes them a little bit more likable. Following this, Amy has a bad meeting with Jordana, and she goes to this meeting at Jordana's house, okay? And she has this problem where Jordana's kind of like trying to retaliate to her because she had to cancel a meeting because of her daughter. And she's like, oh, I have to go, and leaves Amy alone in her house. And Amy's just wondering, and she ends up having a phone call with Paul. And in this phone call, she also breaks down. She tells him that there's not many things that she likes and that she's tired of pretending. And Paul is like, yeah, I get you. And he's just there to listen without being like, you should write a gratitude journal like George. And Amy generally appreciates this, and is a moment where Amy breaks down herself. So in this episode, both of them break down, and we can see the genuine emotion that comes with that they're not these people that are just masking and pretending all the time. They're human. Yeah, but this also is bad because she has a husband. So yeah. But we move and we see Danny. He's standing in this piece of land that he's obsessed with, eating Burger King, and just like trying to get a loan to buy this land so he can build his parents a house. Because remember, he's a contractor. He builds things. He fixes things. Apparently, supposedly. But yeah, he cannot get a loan because he has really bad credit because everything that has gone on in his life with Paul, with Isaac. And then he's like, wait a second, but maybe for the church I can get a loan and I can use that money. And he starts scheming, right? And you're just like, no, like I thought that you repented and that you just like, we're gonna move. But no, he thinks, okay, well maybe the church will give me a loan. He just has this thing, he's stubborn and he just wants to build his parents a house, because if not, he feels that he failed and that he cannot move on with his life and be a husband and be a parent, which is what he generally wishes to be. And yeah, finally, Jordana, after like canceling the meeting, after making her wait for hours, she ends up being like, here's the deal for Amy. And the deal actually requires Amy to work for 5 more years. And this is something that she doesn't want. So she's like, fuck, this girl is trying to fuck me. Like, okay, well, I'm gonna need some time. And while she's thinking about this, she's in her shop where Mia is. And Paul comes through. And he's like, hey, I'm looking for Kayla. And obviously Kayla is Mia, but is actually Amy. And Amy's the one that receives him. And she's like, oh, no, like, you have to go. But at the end of whatever happens there, he is like, you know what, like, I actually think that you're hotter than Mia, and kisses her. She's married. She allows that as well. We move, episode 4. So this is called Just Not All at the Same Time. The previous 3 episodes laid out this atmosphere of tension that I mentioned, and here it intensifies, like it peaks tension for the first time. It doesn't climax, it peaks tension. Why? Amy has to go to Vegas to do this thing with Jordana and with Foster's and just talk about Cleo House and business stuff, right? And Paul is like, well, if you're going to Vegas, I'm going to Vegas because now you're my girl. That's not the case. She's married. She has tried to set boundaries between Paul and herself, but obviously he kissed you, you kissed him back, you've been texting, boundaries are blurred. Amy, you failed. I'm sorry, but you failed with that one. And in this episode, we see Amy generally masking her emotions the most. She plays the perfect role at being the CEO with the perfect family, with the perfect husband and daughter, and just does her speech, does her thing. She gets a haircut. She's like, okay. And she's like, okay, yeah, I can be this. If this is what society demands of me, I can do it, and I can do it well, and I can pretend well. You're Dana, you want 5 more years of me? I'll give them to you. Let's just do the deal. while this is happening, Paul has stolen Danny's truck to go to Vegas because he's like, Amy's now my girl and I need to see her. So she goes, gets them both drunk, and steal the car. When Isaac and Danny realize that he has left the truck and whatever and has gone to Vegas and is talking to Amy, well, they don't realize here that she's talking to Amy. They think it's Kayla. And that he's talking to Kayla and went to see Kayla. They're like, we have to go. The thing is that Isaac, he cannot go to another state because, oh, by the way, all of this is set in California, to Vegas, and that's another state, so he cannot do that. He's obviously on parole. He doesn't care. He's trash. He fears nothing in life. He's just like, yeah, let's go. And they go. And they go to the hotel. And he loses money at gambling because of course he does. He's this type of person that has money and you just don't know where this dude has money from or whatever he's doing it. And it's just like, loses money. They go to the all you can eat and they're like drinking and trying to find Paul. And then Danny's walking past the hotel where this meeting was going on, where Amy was talking, and he sees Amy and he hackles her, and he mentions the road rage incident that at this point had it already did its rounds on social media. So insert a new character, Naomi. Naomi, she's very attached to social media. She knows about this and she gets a little like, ooh, maybe it wasn't Amy, because she's very jealous of Amy and she is very worried about perception, about how she's going to be perceived. She's a stay-at-home mom but doesn't want to be called a stay-at-home mom because she thinks that is demeaning in this feminist society that we live in. So she's like, no, I do my own things and stuff, and like she doesn't like how people perceive her, so she tries to change that a lot. And Naomi comes into play later on. Just remember her, okay? So after the whole heckling goes down, they just start running from police and running and trying to chase Paul and this and that, because bear in mind, Paul and Amy had a really cute scene in this episode. Not that I condone what Amy's doing because she's cheating, obviously, but that's not for me to say. I shall not judge. But they connect without any sexual type of thing. They just smoke a joint and have fun, and Amy lets go a little bit, kind of like when she did on the call, that she let go a little bit and was able to connect with herself, and that actually did her very, very good. But anyway, that's just a little nugget of information I insert there. But the episode ends with Danny and Isaac being caught by police and Amy just standing there watching it all go down, and in her pettiness she's like, yes, fuck you, I win this one. We move. Episode 5, Such Inward Creatures. I really like this episode, by the way, but it's all over the place. It's generally all over the place, but it's important. It dismantles a little bit of everything that has been building, like all the tension that has been built up and the characterization and the narrative. It dismantles it and it adds more plot at the same time. And something very important happens in this episode. Let me just get through it. So we start this episode with Danny having nothing better else to do, befriending George, Amy's husband. So he does this under an alias. He's like, yo, I'm sane, and he plays into this whole like wellness fitness culture that George is on about. And yeah, they kind of like hit it off really, really good. And Danny has this plan of like befriending George to get to know more about them, because he thinks that Amy is just a gold digger. But anyways, he thinks that, so he thinks that George has the money. But then then he's like, oh, that's not the case. Actually, this dude does nothing. He just has money from his daddy. And that means that in his house, I bet that there's a lot of art stuff that is quite valuable. And oh, look at that. Amy actually does her own thing. Great. So that happens, and Danny tells his plan to Isaac. Isaac is like, are you dumb? Because Isaac at this point, he's arrested again, not in jail, but like with a thing on your heel. I don't know how that's called, but yeah, under house arrest, I think, or he cannot leave certain areas after the incident with the police in Vegas. All right. So because he learned about the whole famous dad situation going on for George, he's like, I'm gonna plan a robbery. I'm gonna just go there and be like with Isaac's like two buddies. I'm just gonna be there and go like, hey, this is going wrong for you. You need to check out this in your house. We are contractors, we can do that. We're electricians, we can do that. We're gas people, we can do that. Whatever it was. And he's planning that to steal. But he actually ends up really liking George. So he calls the whole deal off. Again, another instant that humanizes him a little bit more. And you're like, okay, well, that's good. But Michael and Bobby, those are the friends of Isaac. They're like, no, we're still gonna do it either way. And they try and they failed. And in their failure, they actually attack Fumi. So enter Fumi. Fumi is the mother of George, which she is protective and manipulative and also with that elitist mindset. And she ends up not dying, but like she's heavily injured. She falls down the stairs. These two dudes leave. They head for a run. And yeah. And Fumi is also very important because she observes a lot and she knows more than she should about Amy's marriage to her son. So she hides her secrets, and also another secret that she hides is that they're actually broke. She needs money from Amy, and she kind of needs George to stick it out with Amy. And that's why she doesn't tell. And that's why she eventually, in the next episode, is going to take the blame for the road rage incident when Naomi starts putting her head in business that doesn't mind her and starts to blame Amy about this whole road rage incident. But Fumi takes that hit. Amy feels that she owes her. She always takes her on lavish shopping sprees to kind of like pay her back for knowing more about her than she should. And she doesn't care because like Fumi's actually a gold digger with Amy. I know, harsh. But yeah, anyway, Naomi at this point is getting increasingly more jealous of Amy, and it seems to be all based upon Jordana and how Jordana genuinely likes and likes to test Amy, and Naomi hates that. And you bear in mind, Naomi is married to Jordana's brother, so like she shouldn't be all this jealous and all this type of thing, but you know, whatever. That's weird. That's weird, like she's being weird. And that's basically all that happens in that episode. Believe me when I tell you it's all over the place, but it's good. It's a good episode. It's also mad funny. Everything that I'm saying, everything is, yes, it has a sprinkle of sadness and tragedy, and it's layered, and as I said, you can get very into it, but it's really, really funny. We're gonna move now to episode 6. We draw a magic circle. This episode, Isaac kind of is like over trying to let Danny achieve success and do anything. He's like, you know what, I'm gonna take over the whole business and the renovation. And remember, they ended up managing to get that loan for the church to do renovations in the church, and Isaac is now like, I'm gonna get the money, you guys are gonna do the renovation. And he's just like trying to be all this alpha type of thing, but like he lacks a little bit of intelligence in order to do that, you know. And he has this kind of like confrontation with Edwin, remember, Veronica's husband, about a basketball tournament out of all things. He's just like, no, we're playing. No, we're playing. I don't care, we're playing. And they played, which doesn't end up being a bad thing because Danny and Paul start bonding a little bit, especially because Kayla, Amy, broke up with Paul, and Paul, in his first actual confrontation with life and how life can work sometimes and it doesn't always go the way that you want, he's starting to mature and he's starting to understand how important work is and how important everything is if you want to achieve happiness, because it's not only about work, it's not only about money, it's not only about family, it's not only about faith, it's about everything. You have to take care of everything. So he's starting to mature, and that's good. But however, he doesn't talk to Danny about his breakup with Kayla. He's like very close off. He's very much like, I'm hurt, I don't want to talk about it, especially not with you, because Kayla is Amy, the woman that you hate. Anyway, Naomi meets with Amy and does this whole confrontation thing where at the end Fumi takes the blame that I mentioned before. It happens now. And because of that, before Fumi takes the blame, Amy and Danny actually meet in person, because every petty thing that they've been doing to each other, whether it was on the phone, via text, via Yelp, like doing it to each other, they never like met and talked. But they end up meeting in this episode and talking in a parking lot, each in their car, very reminiscent of how they met. And Amy's just trying to be like, yo, Danny, I'll give you money if you take the blame of the road rage incident, thinking that, you know, she had no other option. So they talk, and then an angry man in a car runs by them, and they both react very angrily, and they just let that anger go, and you can see that they're just two in the same. Anyway, at the end, Amy pulls off, and she's like, I'm not giving you any money because Fumi take the blame, remember? And yeah, Danny, in his desperation, he clicks the link where you are like supposed to give information if you know anything about the road rage incident, where he was going to take the fall for the money for Amy, but because Amy pulled out and was like, oh, don't worry, like my mother-in-law took the blame, Danny, in his desperation, he blames his cousin Isaac, which we already know he was on parole, now he's on house arrest, and he ends up going to jail. Why is this so important? Because in this episode, Isaac also shows Danny where he hides all of his money and tries to, you never know if Isaac is full of bullshit or genuinely feels what he says, like you never know. Tells him that, you know, they're family, they're brothers, like I will only tell you where my money is and this and that, and Danny throws him under the bus and he's sent to jail. Episode 7. This is actually set 8 months later. So in this 8 months, nothing has actually truly happened between Amy and Danny. They seem to be like, cool. And this episode is just so intense. You think that things are okay. So basically, we kind of understand that Danny has done the church thing, has got money from that, has stolen Isaac's hidden money and got some money from that, and he bought the land and he built his parents the home, and he's achieving success in the Cho Brothers business, like doing more work, and things are going good for him. But Edwin, Veronica's husband, is like, whatever you guys are doing, I want to do too, because I want to provide for my children, because I didn't know how expensive children were, and you are now doing well, and I just want to be a part of it, because he doesn't believe that they're doing this with genuine work. He smells something, he knows something's wrong, and he's right, but obviously they make him feel that he's crazy. He's like, anything illicit, anything illegal? No, we don't do that here, which we know is a lie. So Edwin just kind of leaves, and you can see that Edwin has mixed feelings about Danny, because Veronica really, really likes Danny, but Veronica is Edwin's wife. So he's a bit, you can start to see that he's getting a little bit jealous about Danny. And also Danny becomes the church praise singer, which used to be Edwin's role. So again, he's a bit that hurt me type of way, and Danny becomes like super and uber involved with the church, and he seems to have changed, but the way that he got there is questionable, and things are going okay. But you know, this episode is kind of like what goes around comes back around, and that's just the way that it is, which is sad, but karma, you know. Like, it has consequences. Your choices have consequences, and that's what this episode is all about, because Amy's also seeing good things happening to her. She closed the deal, she bought an enormous mansion, vacation house for her family. George continues to do anything and take care, and also he's hands-on with the child, so he actually does something, that's true. But in terms of, you know, their properties and the business and anything, he still is the same. But Amy is kind of like okay with where she's at. She also hired a full-time nanny. She's like, yeah, I made it. She even changed her hair and all this type of things. She's like, okay, things are good. However, disconnected, and that she's like, okay, is this all? Am I supposed to feel fulfilled now? Am I supposed to feel not so alone now? She obviously still does. Okay. She also has a confrontation that is very PC with her husband, where George admits having an emotional affair with Mia. He didn't fuck her or anything like that, but he was masturbating, seeing her pictures on Instagram, which, who does that? And he was also meeting with her, and for him, he said that it was like an emotional connection, which that's horrible. Like, imagine your husband telling you that. But Amy still doesn't say anything about her situation with Paul. She stays quiet and she acts very PC, very how in therapy they handle everything. And they're like, oh, that's okay. I love you. Who will ever say that to a husband if you love him? You'll beat his ass, you know what I mean? Also, Amy goes to therapy alone, and she tells the therapist how, yeah, like all of her problems are based on this emotional affair that George had with Mia. But we know that's not true, and you can see in her face that she doesn't even believe it. She's like, yeah, but no. We know that no. Important thing that happens here is that, remember that George and Danny are friends, George and Sane being Danny. George invites Danny, Sane, to a party where they're gonna like show his art, because he does art, and they're gonna show his art and whatnot. And Danny is like, okay, yeah, I'll go. In a way, he wants to go because he wants to close the circle with Amy, because, you know, he feels good in the church, he feels good with having built his parents a home, he's okay in the business, everything with his brother is okay. He wants to close that chapter with Amy. The thing is that he saw a picture of Kayla on his brother's phone, and he saw a tattoo that she had. And when they talk, Amy and him talk, and it's actually a good, intense interaction where Amy tells him that everything just fleets away. Because Danny's like, what do I have to do to achieve your level of success? Are you happy? And Amy's like, everything just fleets away. Kind of, you know, like, everything just, like, she's numb. She's disconnected. She doesn't feel fulfilled. But when Danny's in the party and Amy's doing her thing, she actually, like, goes to pick up something, and Danny sees the tattoo on Amy's back, and he's like, Kayla? And Amy's like, and Danny there is like, this is fucked up, like, you mess with my brother, why would you do that? That's not even the game that we were playing. And he just leaves the house, and he's like, you know, like, you are wrong in the head. And he leaves. After this, he arrives home, and Danny's arriving home, talking with his brother, and Paul is like, yo, like, the numbers, they don't add up, like, where is this all the extra money coming from? And Danny's just playing it like, well, you know, I'm a mess, or this and that. So again, we know that he stole it from Isaac. But, you know, in a way of trying to get that conversation out of what is happening, he just tells, you know, that girl Kayla is actually Amy. Yeah, the crazy road rage incident lady, and she just got with you to, like, mess with me and mess with my head. And Paul, he was already, like, getting over the breakup with Kayla, with Amy. And he learns about this, and he's like, no fucking way. And he is still immature, he's still young, and he's like, oh, so that was the case, so now I'm gonna fuck with you. And he goes to Amy's house and tells George, yo, I fucked your wife, and bounces. Literally, that's what happens. And then we see, you know, Danny picking up his parents from the airport with Paul and this and that, taking it to the house. The house is burned down. The house is burned down. Immediately, Danny thinks it's Amy, and the circle starts again. Episode 8. In this episode, beef starts getting allegorical and metaphorical. It opens with Amy in her youth having sex with an older guy, and she puts a blanket on her face, like all over her, so you cannot see her. And then when she's being she looks at herself in the mirror and she sees a witch. So this witch, it's from Amy's youth, from a child's book that she used to read that was like, if you're doing anything wrong, like, I'm always watching, I always know. And she has this fixation that she doesn't want to be caught doing anything wrong. And whenever she sees anything wrong, she sees the witch, all right? So, for example, she caught her dad cheating with her mom, and the other woman, she saw her as the witch when she was doing this whole being fucked by a random guy and not allowing the guy to see who she was. She saw the witch, and she will see the witch randomly, you know? The thing with that thing, I do have, like, I know I'm only telling you what happens and I'm trying to not put input about what I think and stuff like that. But the thing with that scene is that it's put there and you're like, what is happening? Is she like a prostitute? Is this a sugar daddy, sugar baby situation? Is she just doing this to be like a rebel? Like, you have no idea what that is. And it can mean so many things, because it can mean that maybe Amy to get out of the situation that she was as a child and to pursue her education and to achieve Korea House and the deals and all that high level and all that money, she had to be a prostitute. Like, I have no idea what that means. Maybe she was just rebelling and trying to do things that were out of her comfort zone that she deemed bad, like maybe having sex. I don't know. It's just left there and it's never explored again, because I know there's lots of things that are just given to you, but there will always be linked at the end. This thing in particular, it isn't, but I just have to tell you that that's how the scene opens and that the witch does have a meaning. All right, then we continue. Fumi offers to talk with George, like offers Amy in one of those shopping sprees to talk to George about the whole cheating with Paul situation. And, you know, like, Fumi is somewhat nice and tells her, you know, like, you said that that George anchors you, but George will be at the bottom of the ocean without you. But we also know that Fumi has ulterior motives, so I don't believe that. I don't think that George and Amy are that pair, you know. But Fumi's like feeding onto this and be like, I will talk to George. However, when Amy goes back home to see George, at that point George had left with June, their daughter, and didn't want to know anything about Amy. She goes back home and they're there, and George is willing to listen to her, and Amy completely breaks down and opens up to George, telling her how she genuinely feels and why she did the things that she did and the mistakes that she has done, and how she feels so disconnected, how she feels so stressed out, so alone, so misunderstood, not seen by her husband, all this type of things. And George's response is, I want a divorce. And this obviously breaks her, because she's like being honest and open, and every time that she is her genuine self, she's just like, trash, like, we don't want to deal with you, we don't want to deal with your things, we don't want this, we don't want that. So I feel for Amy in this part, even though she did something that was wrong, but she forgave George when George had that emotional affair with Mia. But like, we don't know if she did that only because she was having an actual affair with Paul. So it's just a sad situation all around. Danny, because obviously Danny is truly going through it again, because the house that and all the work that he put into that house for his parents, the house burned down. He immediately think, oh, it was Amy. However, he saw Edwin. Remember Edwin that was jealous of him, and the guy from church and Veronica's husband. He sees him leaving the scene when he finds the house being like lit up, not being lit up, already lit up. So he follows him, he confronts him. It turns out that it wasn't him, the one that did the arson, but he was sending magazines, like subscriptions to him to mess with his head, because he overheard Veronica saying that, you know, that Danny had been the one for her, and he was just like super sad, super depressed. He just had a baby with her, this is her wife, and she says that about Danny. So Edwin was kind of like trying to retaliate a little bit. Danny ends up actually understanding him and being like, what you did is not nice, but like, it's okay, man, whatever. And that again humanizes Danny, but he's still like, okay, it was Amy that did this. Turns out, no, it was his own fault because of the wiring. He put bad wiring all over the house, and the house ended up burning because of bad wiring. So it was his own fault. However, he lies to Paul to manipulate him into thinking that it was Amy because of what he did. So ultimately, it was his fault that the house was burned, and he says, oh yeah, it was arson, oh yeah, it was Amy, and Paul feels like absolute shit. With this being said, George goes to Amy's house to try to frame her for arson, like put a glove and a gasoline, whatever, in her bathroom and frame her for arson, right? But at this point, George already know that Danny is not sane, because remember that Amy told him everything, absolutely everything, and he knows that. So George is like, yo, sane, but he knows that it's Danny, and he knows everything that's been going on, and he's quite scared. So he tells little June to be like, go and get in the car, and like, we'll have to leave. Like, he's being like very cautious about the situation because obviously his daughter is there. But because little June saw Sane and she knows him, and Sane will always give her Skittles, she's actually excited. And when he sees a Sane's Danny's car, he knows that he will always have Skittles in it. So she jumps into Danny's car, and when a whole altercation goes through between George and Danny, they have a confrontation. George is like, I know you're not sane, I know you're Danny, I know what's been going on. And like, Danny's like, okay, and trying to leave when he gets in the car, and police is already on the way, and he actually like made George pass out because he pushed him and he bumped his head in the wall. So the police are coming, and he just gets in the car and drives away. What happened? Little June is in his car with her doggy eating Skittles, and now this just escalated because he has June, you know? And we move to episode 9, The Great Fabricator. This episode is all about escalation. This is where all of the elements that we've seen and all the themes that we've seen being touched and played with in Beef bond together and escalate and peak. Like, this is the climax. So basically, Isaac is released from prison. Yeah, remember what Danny did to Isaac. So Isaac obviously wants revenge. And he goes into Paul and Danny's like apartment, you know, with this whole idea of like, I need my money now, blah, 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 blah. However, an Amber Alert has been sent off for little June, and June is there with them. So Isaac is like, okay, this is now going to be a kidnapping for a ransom situation. I'm going to get all my money and more, and it's going to be fantastic, okay? So Amy now knows what's happening with June, and she's very, very scared. She thinks it's Danny, but then Isaac is the one that calls her and does this whole like, we want all this amount of money and this and that. And they're obviously threatening her with killing June. They're no killers. Like Isaac, Michael, and Bobby's, they're no killers. They're just like trash. But they're threatening her that they're gonna kill her daughter, that they need money, this and that. Obviously, she cannot get out of her bank account just 500K, which is what they're demanding of her. But at this point, she's in Jordana's house. And Jordana has so many valuable things. So she's like, you guys come to where I am, gives Jordana's address, and you can steal here and you can easily like grab $1 million and go. Okay, bear in mind that at this point, Jordana is with Naomi romantically. We know that she's a lesbian. We know that that's what Naomi was so jealous of Amy, because Jordana give like flirtatious vibes to Amy. And at this point, they're together. And yes, Naomi was her brother's wife, so it is a bit all over the place. But anyway, they go to Jordana's house. Isaac and Michael are the ones that go in to like do the whole robbery thing, while Bobby's left with Paul and Danny and little June in the car and the doggy. Okay, so Paul blacks out. No, Paul makes Bobby black out, and they get little June out of the car and put her in her mom's vehicle and all this type of things, and they're trying to do the right thing, and they're trying to get in to just, you know, do the right thing. But obviously it doesn't work for them and they get put into this place where they cannot leave. And Amy is like, you know, don't worry, I will blame it on them, even though she now knows that it's not their fault. But she's telling Isaac, don't worry, I will blame it on them, like, you do your thing, just leave my daughter alone. While this has happened, Naomi and Jordana go to one of the escape rooms that they had in their house, the security systems. But Naomi, by mistake, closes the safe house before Jordana is in, and Jordana is actually halfway in, and she ends up killing Jordana because she's cut in half. I know, gory out of nowhere, but I did told you that it explores different genres, and these 2 episodes explores a little bit of gory and more metaphorical, allegorical things going on. So whilst Paul and Danny are in this place, they can hear the sirens coming and police coming, and they know that they have to go. So Paul is taller, and Danny helps him get out, and they're trying to help, and Paul is trying to help Danny get out as well. So he's not the only one that is able to escape. And at this point, we learn something very important, and is that Danny has been betraying his brother a lot and lying to his brother a lot, because he saw that his brother could have a future, and his brother wanted to go to uni, but he at that point just threw away all of his letters to university admissions. So Paul never heard back, and he never got a chance to go to uni because Danny wanted them to be equals. Danny had this thing with his brother where he kind of wanted him to always be around, so he wasn't alone and he didn't feel alone. Obviously that's not how it works, but he was trying to do that, and he comes clean to Paul at this moment, and obviously this breaks Paul's heart, and he actually leaves without Danny. Danny's left in the house. Because the escape room was activated, a gas came into the building, and police comes. Michael is actually killed. Isaac is arrested, so is Bobby. And when Amy comes out and this whole shenanigan is over, she's like, where's my daughter, talking to the police officer, and they're like, your husband came and picked her up. And she's like, and he left? Like, can you imagine? They just left her there. So like, you really feel for Amy at this point. So she gets into her car feeling very numb and like being like, what the fuck? And Daddy's able to escape via drain, and he's still one of Jordana's vehicle. And at this point, we're back to the beginning. We have Danny alone in a car, Amy alone in a car, and they see each other. When they see each other, they start just chasing after each other, just saying shit to each other on the cars in a very deserted landscape, and they end up falling off a cliff. And this is now entering episode 10. Episode 10 is called Figures of Light. At this point, they're already like down in the cliff. They have no reception. They're obviously injured because they fell off a cliff, and they end up being forced to rely on each other. Okay, so again, they have no reception, they're injured, they're away from the road, from people. And Amy, the gun that Danny stole from Bobby, I forgot to mention this, Amy steals it, and she starts forcing Danny to like do things for her, like forge some berries and not leave her because she strained her ankle, all this type of things, right? They're very, very messy, very, very petty with each other. The berries that they eat, they end up being poisonous. So this episode becomes so allegorical and hallucinogenic because they end up, after the effects of the berries, they end up being in a state of a high almost, and they end up opening up with each other. They genuinely bond, they open, they mirror each other, not only metaphorically but literally. In the episode, Amy is Danny and Danny is Amy. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So they can see all the pain that they have inside. They can see the background, where they come from, where all of these emotions come from, the solitude, the loneliness, how misunderstood, everything that they have to mask, all of these emotions, how they have to pretend as immigrants in contemporary American, their depression, their suicide ideation. They see all of that from the perspective of another, while inhabited, the other's body is a bit crazy, but that's how it happens. So everything that you've been seeing building up in Beef, you can see how they finally realize it and they see each other. So it's beautiful. It's genuinely beautiful. They bond. They just feel for the first time not alone, and kind of like accepting their fate, because they think that they're gonna die. Plot twist, they don't die. They recover, they start laughing. It's a beautiful scene, and they're walking back to society because they've been trying, they keep trying, and they're making it. And at this point, they genuinely have bonded, and there's a connection between them that when you connect with a person, that cannot be changed. And they have found that. They finally not feel alone. But George, out of nowhere, and let me tell you this with the whole sex thing that I mentioned about, was she a prostitute, was she this, and the witch thing, makes no sense, and that's a little bit of a narrative plot hole. George, out of nowhere, comes with a gun and shoots Danny in a tunnel. George wasn't even looking for Amy, didn't care about Amy, just took June and left and bounced and claimed immediate emergency custody of her and left her stranded, and now he finds her in the middle of nowhere. That for me is weird, and with a gun, that for me is just weird. That made no sense whatsoever. But however, we move, and George shoots Danny. So this is how it ends. Danny does not die, neither does Amy, but we're in a hospital room where we can see that days been passing and passing and passing, and Danny has been in a coma, and Amy has not left his side. And she ends up cuddling with him and hugging him, which comes back to how alone in solitude and misunderstood they were in the beginning, and how now they have each other, and they genuinely have each other because they genuinely see each other. And she doesn't leave, and at the end, Danny moves his hand, like hugging and cuddling her back, so waking up from the coma, and that's how it ends. So, my opinion is that this show is great because it's funny, it's sad, it's tragic, it's analytical of contemporary society in America, it's analytical of immigration and the position that people are placed, it's analytical of all of these safe spaces that society keeps trying to create, but it just masks a bigger issue, and pretending and social masking and detachment from your surroundings and from your society. And I love that. I loved how it was acted out. I love how it was directed. Each episode has somewhat of a different director and writer, but they do come back and forth. And I really, really thought that it worked. I had those two pet peeves with the whole sex scene and the ending where George shoots Danny, that I thought there are a little bit of narrative plot holes, but overall it works, and I love how the tension was built, how it peaked throughout, how it climaxed. I loved it. I love how it analyzed human emotion and society. I genuinely did. Also, it's an A24 production. The angles, the cinematography, the color palette, the editing, everything is done with a very high standard. It's very beautiful to watch, even if you're only gonna watch it for the cinematography. It's a good watch in that sense. Also, I would highly recommend, I think it makes you think. As I said at the beginning, it's like an onion, and it can it can be as layered as you want it to be. So if you're just watching it for the funny bits of it, and for the comedy aspect of it, is great. If you're feeling a certain type of way, it's also great because it gets you thinking, and I think that that's the intention of the show, to actually think a little bit more, be behind all of these things, so we can do that in our society if you were to be in American society or Western culture. You understand what I mean? Yeah, and that's my opinion on it. I genuinely liked it. I did. And I especially love the ending, and I love the dynamic that Amy and Danny had. There's nothing too bad with it, minus the two things that I mentioned, because everything else was very well linked and it made sense in the plot, in the characterization, in the narrative. Those two things were a little bit out of the blue, blah blah, but it worked. In my opinion, it's a good watch. Go watch it. I give it an 8 out of 10 in IMDb. And yeah, that's Beef. I hope you enjoy. Bye. Kisses.